So we are on the draw here. Our opener is a 2 island hand with a Whirl-a-Rogue, a Shrivel, a Jace, a Krasis, and a Surrak. This hand is actually quite close. I'm going to keep it because I'm on the draw, and being able to play either a Shrivel or a Krasis into Whirl-a-Rogue is pretty good, assuming we do draw lands. We are banking on that a little bit. We don't have any green mana at this point, which is a little bit unfortunate. But we'll see how this plays out. We'll see what our opponent's actually playing. Looks like a blue-red deck of some variety. And we are playing 4 Yavimaya Coast, 4 Lumbering Falls, and more green sources than blue. So it's a little bit unusual to have this many islands in our opening hand, but we'll see how this progresses. Hopefully we'll be able to use our Spell Shrivel and then deploy a Whirl-a-Rogue, but we also don't know what is going on the opposing side of the table, as we're just seeing a bunch of islands and blue-red lands and stuff of that nature. So we can actually just pass here, which I kind of like, and then just hold up the Bounding Krasis. So yeah, this is kind of an unusual game. Neither of us have really done anything up to this point. Our opponent does have a Wandering Fumarole, a manland, so we have to be worried about that a little bit. It's pretty likely that this just runs into some sort of a counterspell, but that's not the end of the world. So it could be a Clash of Wills, could be... Yeah, so that is just going to be a Clash of Wills. So now I think we just deploy Whirl-a-Rogue and hope to not run into a second Clash of Wills, though we definitely could run into a second Clash of Wills. Okay, yep. There is another Clash of Wills. So now hopefully we'll see our opponent, what exactly is going on with our opponent's deck. Okay, it is a Golden Knight Castigator, so we know we're up against the flying blue-red Fliers deck, essentially. So I think we just want to go ahead and deploy this second Whirl-a-Rogue here. The card is pretty powerful, especially the Thopters, because we know we're up against a flying deck. This game hasn't progressed the way we really wanted it to, but there's some chance we can use our opponent's Golden Knight Castigator against them. These Thopters may become chump blockers. They also may become attackers. It's pretty unclear here. If we had drawn another land, we could have played our Jace or played an Advocate or what have you, but I think we just want to take one more hit from the Golden Knight Castigator. It is going to drop us down to 11, and it looks like our Whirl-a-Rogue is going to bite the dust. So we're still short on lands. Let's go ahead and play the Sylvan Advocate out. And it may run into a counterspell, but we have negate, so we can basically counter anything our opponent tries to do here. So yeah, I think we just want to counter the Spell Shrivel. We just want to get our Sylvan Advocate into play. And let's just go ahead and crack with one of our Thopters and leave the other one back to chump block. So this could end up being a game where we are simply just unable to deploy everything in our hand. Fire Impulse, that's just going to take out our Advocate. And yep, we're just going to block the Golden Light Castigator. And, okay, so we did draw another land. I think we just want to, once again, play out a Sylvan Advocate, and now we have Spell Shrivel to back it up. Our opponent's also got 3 cards in hand, so it's pretty likely we're up against something. If we attack here for 1, that seems a little bit aggressive. We probably just want to use this Thopter as a chump blocker for the Golden Light Castigator. So yeah, let's plan on doing that. And here's a Rattle Chains, which we could counter or we could just let resolve. If we let it resolve, we probably are going to just chump the rattle, or block the Rattle Chains, I should say, with our Thopter token. So, pretty close decision here in terms of what we want to do, but let's just go ahead and let it resolve. So, Rattle Chains is now in play. And we'll see if our opponent has something else they want to deploy. No. So it's just the Rattle Chains now. So we're pretty much looking to draw a forest to cast our Surrak. Although, okay, our opponent's tapping mana. So yeah, we're definitely just going to Spell Shrivel this Golden Light Castigator. So, if our opponent attacks with both creatures, which is pretty likely what's going to happen, we can just simply block the Rattle Chains. If we draw a Forest or Yavimaya Coast, we can actually just win the game with Surrak. So, hopefully we do. And we didn't. So, that's pretty unfortunate. I think we're just gonna attack here with our Sylvan Advocate and play the Jace to bounce the Golden Light Castigator. Our opponent can just replay Golden Light Castigator, but we don't really have too much of a choice right here. In terms of our play, if our opponent does replay Golden Light Castigator, we actually want them to attack the Jace, because if this attack goes at our face, then we are unable to even use our Yavimaya Coast for green mana, but our opponent is correctly attacking us, and now we did draw the green mana, so it's 1 turn too late, essentially. We can attack our opponent for 8 with the Sylvan Advocate, but that's not actually going to be enough. So, yeah, I mean, we can go ahead and bounce the Golden Light Castigator representing a counterspell, or we can try to scry into a Bounding Crisis. So let's try to scry into a Bounding Crisis, which could tap the Golden Light Castigator. And we're going to bottom the Westvale Abbey. We did not draw it, so we're pretty much just dead to the swing here from the Golden Light Castigator. Pretty frustrating, because if we just were at 1 more life, we would play Surrak, give it self-haste, and then bash like we were planning on doing on our last turn. But yeah, I mean, the island opener was definitely not ideal, and we're going to end up losing to the Golden Light Castigator. And it could be that our opponent also has another burn spell, but that's not really particularly relevant. So let's just go to our sideboard. We are going to be on the play this game, so we probably just want to board in another copy of Surak, because that card is nice in this matchup. The Stratus Dancer is pretty good, just because it flies. Pulse of Marasa, I like quite a bit. I also like the negates. Cards we don't really want, the Jace Unravelers aren't that great here. Nissa is pretty marginal just because a lot of the combat is going on in the air. So we've got a bunch of counter magic. Other cards I would consider here, Rapid Bite can be used as a removal spell. Gaia's Revenge can also be pretty decent as like a big finisher. So yeah, let's try boarding both of these cards in. And then we can take out a couple of Dustwatch Recruiters just because they are a little bit slow. So let's try this out for game 2. Alright, so we are going to get to start, and this hand's fine. Lambhole Pacifist is really powerful in this deck when you can just go turn 2, Pacifist, and then hold up counter magic, or just basically ride it to victory. And that's what this hand wants to try and do. Our opponent doesn't have that many ways to actually deal with the Lambhole Pacifist. Fiery Impulse is not a way to deal with it early in the game, and we did draw a Stratus Dancer, but we're still just going to play the Pacifist. It's definitely possible our opponent just passes here or plays a threat. It looks like it is going to be a Stratus Dancer getting cast on our opponent's side of the table. So I think we just want to pass, make sure our Lambholt gets flipped. And we have a 4-power creature to our opponent's 2-power threat. So we are ahead in this race. We also have a bunch of counter magic in hand, which is nice. And it looks like our opponent is a little bit mana screwed here, only having 2 lands. So our opponent's going for a Rattle Chains. We've got a few different counter spells we can actually use to counter this. But I think we want to just go ahead and use the Clash of Wills for 1 here, so that we have negate available to us in case our opponent tries to kill our Butcher or something of that nature. The only downside to playing the Clash is that next turn, assuming we don't draw a blue source, we won't have access to Scatter and Negate. So it looks like our opponent's just running out another copy of Stratus Dancer. So we're pretty far ahead in this situation. We can actually play our own Morph Stratus Dancer, which seems like a pretty powerful play. So let's do that. And our opponent's all the way down to 9. So we're ahead in the race. We've got this Stratus Dancer that can flip up to basically counter anything, any non-creature spell our opponent might play here. And so there's not really a need to attack with our Stratus Dancer. So let's just attack with the Butcher. Looks like our opponent's just not blocking. So we have a couple different options in terms of what we want to play here, but I think we just want to go ahead and continue committing threats to the board and play our Recruiter. And our opponents, yeah, we got a bit mana screwed last game, and now our opponent has gotten a bit mana screwed. But even though we saw our opponent flash their hand a little bit, so an exquisite Firecraft there, we would have been able to counter it. And we never actually gave our opponent a chance to use a Clash of Wills, so I like how we played that game, and now we are back on the draw, which is definitely a disadvantage for Game 3. So, a few different cards we can look at here, but I think we just want to probably just board in this Dustwatch Recruiter and cut the Gaia's Revenge, because Gaia's Revenge is on the draw. It can end up being a bit slow. But so our opponent, we'll see what they've got going on. We're definitely going to keep this. We have a Pacifist on turn 2, which is our best turn 2 play in this matchup. We also have a Krasis into a Whirler Rogue, so pretty happy with this start, and it looks like our opponent's gone ahead and mulliganed, so can't complain. We're going to start on Lumbering Falls, and then next turn play our Lambholt Pacifist, presumably. It's worth noting, though, that our opponent could have Clash of Wills, but they could also just have a flash threat, a flash 2/1, or just not have anything. So against the blue-red flash flyer deck, you always just want to jam. And yeah, we see a 2/1 flash threat being played here. If our opponent does just pass the turn here, that's great for us because our Pacifist is able to flip immediately. But instead, this is a pretty smart play. Our opponent is actually just main phasing a Dimensional Infiltrator. So I think what I like here is we're just going to go ahead and run out this Bounding Krasis before our opponent has the chance to draw potentially a third land for Spell Shrivel. And so we're going to tap one of the Infiltrators, and our Butcher is now online. So we've got a couple big, beefy threats. We also have a lot of nice stuff in our hand. So looks like our opponent's just passing. We are going to start getting in there with our creatures. And now the question becomes, what do we want to play? I don't like playing the Whirler Rogue because it can just run straight into a Spell Shrivel. So let's go ahead and play a Lambholt Pacifist here. So our opponent does actually have Spell Shrivel. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to Clash of Wills that for 1 and force in our Pacifist. It is worth noting, though, that this is going to mean our Butcher is going to flip back into a 3/3. So it's a pretty close race, but we do have Whirler Rogue set up for our next turn, so that has the potential to be quite good. And we don't know if our opponent actually has something they want to cast in their main phase. We also have Pulsamarasa, which, assuming we get something into our graveyard, we can use it as a way to gain life. So I think I like our spot here. It's annoying that our Pacifist did end up having to flip back. But it looks like this is weird. Our opponent's just firing off a Fiery Impulse. This may just be to stop our Pacifist from flipping. I'm not sure. It could be that our opponent has another Fiery Impulse and just wants to put creatures in their graveyard. If I was our opponent in this situation, I might have considered getting rid of the Bounding Crisis instead. But in any case, we are now going to be able to attack with our Bounding Crisis and then just play Whirl-a-Rogue. And Whirl-a-Rogue can block... the Thopters can block these Dimensional Infiltrators. So I think now we've taken control of the game pretty much. There's not a whole lot our opponent's going to be able to do it in this situation. So the best card our opponent could have is probably something like Golden Light Castigator, but even that is probably not good enough. So now our Pacifist is going to be able to flip, and we've got a wealth of options here. We're definitely going to send in these creatures, and we can send in a Thopter, keep one back for potential blocks, but there's really not much our opponent's going to be able to do here. And it looks like these blocks, our opponent may just try to blink out the Infiltrator here. Although that did not work. Or, sorry, not blink it out, but return it to our opponent's hand. But that did not work. So we can pretty much do whatever we want here. Our opponent is not going to be able to win this game. So I think we just play our Oath of Nissa. We'll get a land here and just pass the turn. We have Pulse of Marasa, which we can fire off to rebuy something. But yeah.